Today on Plate and Palate with Megan and Abby, we are going to be talking about pantry staples. I am Megan McGee, owner of Nourish Nutrition Consulting.
And I'm Abby Gardner, owner of Abby Cooks Wild, a meal prep and delivery service based here in Denver.
Abby, one of the things I hear from my clients all day long, every day, is really the pain point of getting food available and accessible.
Yeah.
You and I previously did a conversation around time-saving tips, but I want to hear from you about how to really stock our kitchens, our pantries, our freezers, etc., to help ease some of this accessibility and availability of food. Tell us your secrets.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I'm going to share around that is what I call the P word, because it involves planning. Like you're not going to have what you need if you don't know what you're going to make, right? So um, to set yourself up for success, to have access to food that you need or want to make, or recipes, I guess I should say, then you need to know what you have available already and what you need to get from the store. So having a well-stocked pantry is really the basement level of where this all comes into play. Things that I always have on hand are things like broth. Like, does your recipe call for chicken broth, vegetable broth, beef broth? Okay. And I don't even buy broth. I buy the stock, the chicken stock, the beef stock. And so I always have that on hand and I use that interchangeably. So if a recipe calls for broth, I just use the stock. It's all right. So those are things that I always have on hand, all three, because you never know, right? Beans are another one that I always have on hand, and there's always an assortment. My big ones are black beans, kidney beans, pinto beans, and garbanzo beans. Those are the four that I always have at least one can of each in my pantry. And then this is kind of an oddball ingredient, but I keep canned pumpkin on hand for a couple of different reasons, So it started with my dog. I'm just gonna, okay. Sometimes the dog's belly is a little
Tummy
upset.
issues.
Yes. So I keep it on hand so I can just throw a couple tablespoons in her bowl to help settle her stomach. And I am no veterinarian. I am not claiming anything on that, but so that's part one. But part two is pumpkin's got a lot of fiber in it, and I can add it to baked goods. I can add it to sauces, and nobody knows.
It's a good secret, especially if your kids are fussy. It's a great way to get fiber in.
It's a great thing to have available all the time, because it's one of those things you never, when you need it, you need it. And when you don't, if you don't have it, then you're kind of out of luck.
Yep.
So those are a couple things that I always have on hand in my pantry. And then I have an assortment of grains. I have rice, I have quinoa, I have gluten-free pastas. But I just try to keep basics. It doesn't I know it may sound like, oh my gosh, this is so complicated. It's really not. But if you, like I said, it's the basement level.
The foundational piece. I think, again, I have so many clients who say to me day in and day out, I don't have time to cook. I don't have time to be in the kitchen. I think there's also a gap there of just even knowing how to stock the kitchen.
Right.
I will tell you, for me personally, I tend to lean a little bit more to keeping things in the freezer. That's just what works for me. It doesn't matter if it's dry goods in the pantry or in the freezer.
Yeah.
But some of my favorites along this line, I always try to keep some type of fast protein in my freezer.
Okay.
Whether that's like a turkey burger,
Yeah.
whether that is the other day, I had very, very little groceries and I just wasn't ready to get to the grocery store.
Yeah.
And I had I had some bell pepper and onion,
Yeah.
and I had some chicken sausage, like breakfast sausage, and it was Sunday morning. So I ended up making a little hash. I sauteed up the bell pepper, the onion, threw in the chicken sausage. It was delicious.
Yeah.
It just kind of worked out. I didn't have a game plan, but again, because I had that fast protein,
Mhm.
it was a breeze.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to keep shrimp on hand because
It's a
it
good one.
thaws really fast.
Yep.
And if I'm in that window of time between like 5:30 and 7 o'clock at night, and I'm like, well, I don't have a plan for dinner. I need something quick and easy. Shrimp is usually my saver. So
Yeah.
I always have a bag of shrimp in my freezer. I like to keep some frozen veggies on hand,
Mhm.
even though I don't really rely on them very often. I prefer to use fresh veggies,
Yeah.
but if I'm in a pinch, frozen veggies, and I do try to keep, like there's the mixed veggie blends that you can get, which are great. However, I find that if I'm needing a specific vegetable, the mixed vegetables kind of work against me.
Sure.
So I try to keep a bag of green beans and a bag of corn and a bag of broccoli and all of those kinds of things in my freezer at all
Yeah.
times. So I
Yeah.
can just grab
Yeah.
what I need and move on. And something else, I've got to have my weird ingredients, right? So I'm going to share this little nugget. But if you ever have leftover coffee in your coffee pot in the morning, don't throw it away. Freeze it in an ice cube tray and use it for when you are baking and are baking chocolate dessert,
Mm.
because the coffee actually enhances the flavor of the chocolate. So it kind of just takes it over the top to
Mhm.
the point where you're like, oh, I didn't even know I was missing the coffee until I added it in there. And you can't taste it, but it just makes that chocolate taste so much better. So yeah.
I
Um,
love the idea of the ice cube trays. That's such
yeah, I
a
use
good
those a
one.
lot.
I do
Yeah.
too. In the summer months, I love to make fresh pesto.
Uh-huh.
And the thing about pesto though is that it goes bad fast. It can go bad fast
Yeah.
depending how much. And so it's such an easy one to throw in the ice cube tray and then just break off what you
What you
need.
need.
And
Yep.
yeah, I love that. The ice cube tray is a good one.
Yeah. Just for silly knowledge purposes, the average ice cube that comes out of one of those trays is about 2 tablespoons.
Oh,
So
that's a
just
good one.
for measurement purposes, keep that in the back of your mind. But I love using the ice cube trays also, especially for extra tomato paste. That is like the worst when you
Yeah,
open a can of tomato paste and you only need a tablespoon. And then what are you supposed to do with the rest
with
of
the
your
rest of it.
can?
Mhm. Yeah.
I always just freeze those. Another one that I do freeze a lot, I use these a lot, adobo, chipotle peppers and adobo sauce is
Yeah.
another one. Never use the whole can.
Yeah.
So just put one pepper with a little bit of the sauce in each of the little cubes, and then you have them when you're ready.
Yeah.
And you just pop them out and put them in a Ziploc bag and keep them in your fridge, just label them.
Uh-huh.
I mean, same thing with extra broth. Like, I
Mhm.
think people throw out a lot of broth because they don't know what to do with it once they've
Right.
used what they are gonna do.
Yeah.
So ice cube trays.
Mhm. Are a good one. You bet.
Mhm.
And going
Yeah.
back to the frozen vegetables, I
Uh-huh.
too, Abby, I like fresh better, but it's also one of the things I tell my clients, like, because I always encourage increasing our vegetable
Yeah.
load, right? So let's say you're making the eggs. I kind of gave the example that I made the bell pepper and the chicken sausage the other day, but you're scrambling up some eggs and you want to add a cup of a blend of vegetables, like a fajita pepper blend. It's
Yeah.
so easy to throw that in a pan, saute it up, throw your eggs in, yummy, right?
Right, absolutely. I'm a big proponent of the frozen vegetables. It's just,
Right.
these are all things that you want to have on hand because they are the very things that when you need them, you need them. And if
Yes.
you don't have them, it throws everything else off.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
yeah,
And depending how you shop, so I shop on Sundays most often,
yeah.
and that usually gets me for sure to Friday.
Mhm.
And then my weekends are a little, it just depends if I'm in town, out of town, what I'm doing,
Right.
all the things. But sometimes between Friday night and Sunday, I have this like little bit of a gap where I don't have food planned or prepped or organized. And I also don't want to go to the store.
Yeah.
And it's really nice that 90% of the time I can wing it. And when I
Mhm.
say wing it, I'm still getting a nutrient based meal, like a nutrient
Yeah.
dense meal. All right, I'm going to grill up a turkey burger and I'm going to have some frozen
Yeah.
vegetables on the side. And maybe it's not gourmet, maybe it's not what I want all the time,
Mhm.
but it still gives me a healthy meal that's fast and it's just done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And the other thing that I always have on hand are all the ingredients I would need for those types of dinners. I call those back pocket dinners.
I love
What do
it.
you do, right? What do you do when you really need to get something decent on the table? So I always will have, maybe I'll even take it to this step, but brown a pound of ground turkey or chicken or beef and then throw it back in the freezer. That way, if I want to make tacos or
Mm,
I want to make pasta with meat sauce, it's right there. All I have to do is go to the freezer, dump it in the pan, and I'm done.
and you're done.
But to have a couple of those in the,
Mhm.
just always there,
Yeah,
don't rely on them, but in a
yeah,
pinch,
yeah,
it will save you. Yeah.
yeah. Abby, thanks so much for sharing. I think this is a really big conversation and can really, it's not
Yeah.
simple, honestly. I think so
No.
many people are struggling around how to get food available and accessible.
Yeah.
This is a simplistic idea, but it has so much bang for its buck, right? Setting
Yeah.
ourselves up for success, having a few of those staples that are always available that you can adjust accordingly and improvise, it makes a big difference.
It really does. And I'll just share one more before
Yeah,
we sign off. But there have been nights, especially in the summers, when I don't want to heat up the kitchen by cooking and I, don't have the time to throw something in the crock pot because I didn't think about it in the morning. So I am not opposed to doing things like a grazing board for dinner. And I just empty the refrigerator. What do I have in my crisper drawer? What kind of deli meats are still laying around? Cheeses, vegetables, crackers, like anything that's open
right.
that isn't being consumed goes on the platter.
Yeah,
And it's so liberating to throw dinner on the table in literally 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
And it's fun because
Yeah.
you're like, oh, I forgot I had this. I'm
Uh-huh.
gonna throw this in there. So
I
that's
love
another great one. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome, Abby. Thank you so much for sharing those great ideas. And
My pleasure.
we'll see us back for the
Yeah.
next episode.
Thanks, Megan.
Bye-bye.